It's the end of President Donald Trump's first week in office. His presidency began with opposition marches around the world. We'll explore those and his relationship with minorities. We'll also see what the future holds for senior health care under the new administration right here on Politics and the People. First, self-proclaimed nasty women marched in protest against President Donald Trump all over the world. What did they hope to gain, and is this just the beginning of the resistance? LA progressive publisher Sharon joins us with her point of view. Then, Mr. Trump came to Washington, but he's facing battles on a number of fronts. An upcoming battle, no doubt, will be his decisions regarding elder care, especially in light of his dismantling of Obamacare. Gerontologist Mary Winters has an idea of what that means for seniors and their caregiver kids. Plus, his relationship with blacks has been stormy on some fronts. Remember Congressman John Lewis's broadside calling Trump an illegitimate president? A former Black Panther disagreed. You'll hear reaction on that from Pasadena Black Pages publisher James Farr. I'm Tammy Devine, your guest host for Politics and the People. Hello, and thanks for watching Politics and the People. Our first story, Donald Trump's presidency started out with women all over the world protesting his inauguration. But will the protests amount to anything? Sharon, political activist and publisher of LA Progressive, who attended the Los Angeles Women's March, joins me now with her point of view. Which was bigger, Sharon, the LA one or the DC one?
You know, there are people that are still disputing that. I've heard reports that the Los Angeles March had drew 150,000, 250,000. I've seen reports of as much as 750,000 in Los Angeles. And that is the report that I've seen more consistently than the others. So if that report is right, then the Los Angeles March was larger.
That's a huge amount of people, yeah?
It was unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like that before and really wasn't expecting to see that. My husband and I attended the march, and we were surprised to learn that as we were trying to board our local metro trains at the train station, 10 trains had to pass before we were allowed to board because all of the trains were packed to capacity and people were squished in like sardines in a can. And it looked sort of like just a sea of pink.
There is some criticism, mainly from the right, that there were a lot of vulgar signs, you know, saying some pretty nasty things, and also the speakers, especially in DC, saying, like throwing out F-bombs and things like that. They had to cut away on the broadcast news channels, and there were children there. So some people on the right are saying, you know, that was pretty vulgar, especially to have kids around. And isn't that what, you know, the women were protesting, the vulgarity of Donald Trump? So they're wondering if it's a double standard.
Well, yes, there are people that do claim that it's a double standard, and I'm not really a proponent of vulgarity. I have to admit that I really didn't see much of that. I was at the march. I didn't see vulgar signage. I didn't see, you know, swear words, and I didn't hear anyone from the podium using that language. But on the other hand, I did watch on television, and I saw a couple of incidents at the Washington, D.C. rally, and I think that basically what happened was people just decided that they were going to reappropriate the language.
So Madonna was up there at the podium saying
That's right.
That she had thought plenty about blowing up the White House,
Yes.
but instead she chose love. What did you think when you heard that?
I thought that probably wasn't a remark that she should have made. On the other hand, I don't think that anyone took her seriously.
She kind of walked it back, and you know, there's some reports that maybe the Secret Service is going to investigate her for that. Do you think that's taking it too far?
I think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars to use the Secret Service in that way.
Okay. Do you think if it happened on the other side that there would be a different reaction?
If it happened on the other side in the same manner, I'd feel the same way.
You would. Okay. Okay. Now the pink hat signified, you know, female private parts. Do you think that was the right way to go? That was the something to depict that was necessary?
I think that that was chosen as a way to get attention from the media, and if that was what their intention was, it was extremely effective. The media was out. It was there, and you couldn't, later on in the day when I went home, you couldn't turn on the channel and not see it.
Yeah, a lot of people were talking about it. Now, there is also criticism about like Ashley Judd's speech, for example, where she talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I don't know what I can say, what I can't say, but like incest and periods and things like that. I know it was somebody's poem that she was reading, but she faced some criticism on that. Did you feel? Do you know? Did you watch that and did you feel?
I did
that
hear.
maybe that
I
was
did
not
hear.
the right thing?
No, I did hear parts of it. I think that the issues that she was discussing are horrific. I think the actual acts of incest, that's a horrific act. Saying the word incest.
The incest was more about Donald Trump and his daughter. Like, that's what she was referring to with that incest. And I think that's where the criticism is. Not necessarily that incest took place, but that Donald Trump like looks at his daughter like that and that kind of thing. I think a lot of people were just kind of appalled by that.
Some people may have been, but
You were not.
art, no, I was not. Art is art, and I think that she was doing an art piece. They're just words. And I think that really what's more important is why were the women there?
That's, yeah. I did want to get
really,
into that with you, yeah. What do you think ultimately will come out of the march?
I think that a march of this size cannot be ignored. So ultimately, one of the things that came out of the march immediately is that the legislators looked and saw, regardless of whether they are Republicans or Democrats or independents, they know that the Trump administration and the election of Donald Trump has really awakened the masses. We are looking at a sea change in the way that people are taking charge of democracy, as they always should have. This is supposed to be a participatory democracy. And we've had many people that have just been sort of absent. But that's changing, and I think that that's what this march is a sign of.
Donald Trump himself said, why didn't these people vote if, they're out here in droves like this?
So we don't know that these people that showed up at the march didn't vote. I think in total there may have been 2.5 million
That's
women.
That's stateside, probably, right?
Right in the United States. We do know that about 13 million people voted. So, 130 million people voted.
Oh, yeah.
So 130 million people voted. So we don't know that these women didn't vote.
Okay, so if they did vote and it just wasn't enough, then what? With the women,
Right.
and for future, is this gonna translate into votes for 2018 for the midterms? Is it going to translate into votes for 2020?
Well, what I'm hoping is that it's going to translate into a couple of things. Yes, votes, but also a transformation of our two-party system. I think that, and we also need to look at re-examining the need for the Electoral College. That's been a long time problem that really right now is forefront and center.
Well, maybe we'll have to dig into that another time. Thank you so
Great.
much, Sharon, for joining me. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Coming up, another upcoming battle for the Trump administration will no doubt be the dismantling of Obamacare. What that will mean for seniors and their caregiver kids when gerontologist Mary Winters joins us next. This week, President Donald Trump signed an executive order for the federal government to start easing some of the regulations surrounding Obamacare. Some seniors and their caregiver kids might be wondering what that means for their healthcare needs. Gerontologist Mary Winters joins us now with some answers. So are there some nervous seniors out there right now, Mary?
I think there are a lot of people that are very nervous regarding their health care decisions and what will be changing. But what we know is we don't really know a whole lot. We know that some of the measures within Obamacare were needing to change, and so those were on the chopping block or needing to be altered. But we also know that we have a huge aging population. And
Yeah,
we'll
big numbers, like changing by the day.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. We have 10,000 people turning 65 a day.
Wow.
And so, but what that means for older adults then, which is where I really focus, and my average client is about 88 years old, and we're talking about somebody who's a little more frail, someone who may have some cognitive issues, so they're not able to rally and do the things that they may need for themselves. They really do require the assistance of a professional or a family member to help them through some of these processes.
And these family members, some are the children of the elderly folks.
And some of them are 65 plus too.
Yeah, but they're having to maybe kind of navigate this healthcare field
Correct.
for the first time to help their aging parents. And there's several areas that they have to focus on, right?
Your insurance doesn't cover everything. And there is an increasing number of what are known as ACOs. And those are these partnerships that are being created within Medicare systems. So your doctor will be aligned with the hospital, will be aligned with your home health agency, which will be aligned with your skilled nursing facilities. And so this is actually trying to bring the cost down of care, but it's kind of like lipstick on a pig. It's like an HMO.
What are some major issues that you're looking at when it comes to elder care, and especially in this time of transition from Obamacare into whatever the Republicans end up putting out there?
Right. It's advocacy, really, and people not knowing the system. What you don't know can hurt you. And people have quite a few rights. You can fight for what you need as far as services, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get that unless you know how to work within the system.
And so, the elderly are fragile, right? And so sometimes they don't always speak up for themselves.
Well, and sometimes they don't know. And that's very typical of that generation, too, to not fight the doctor or to argue about what the system is presenting to them. So they just kind of go with the flow. So that's when family and other professionals are really important to step in. And sometimes we have a family dynamic where it's very strange or strained, or there is no family. You would be surprised how many people just don't have anyone.
And that's why gerontologists like you are there, and people in your field, right?
Sure, and there are organizations called geriatric care managers, and they're all over the country. You can look them up and find someone who has the right background to work with your family and make sure that you can get the advocacy that you may need too. But I think advocacy will be a bigger support tool or need. There will be a bigger need on a private level for people to get the services that they need. And that's unfortunate, but that's what happens with everything as it evolves into kind of a socialized medicine, or we have the enormous numbers. Let's say it's under 50,000 now, like say 46 million in regards to 65 plus that are receiving Medicare benefits. Well, 2060, we're going to have about 98 million people in that system. So let's think about how taxing that's going to be and how difficult those processes are going to be moving forward beyond the Trump administration.
Okay, I'm out of time, but I want to end with this. Pessimistic or optimistic with what President Trump will do with Obamacare, Medicare, elder care, and that kind of thing?
Well, he has Tom Price that he's appointed and hoping to get through. And he seems to have some very logical options. Also has Sina Veemer, who will be heading up the CMS. That's a difficult task too.
The CMS being the
Centers for Medicare, Medi-Cal.
The systems. Okay. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for coming on. It's just fascinating to hear from this aspect of it all, and hopefully the seniors out there will get the care that they need, as well as their kids will learn how to navigate the new system coming up. Right?
Absolutely. Just get information, get your advanced healthcare directive in place, and get a power of attorney for you, so that way you know that somebody's on your side.
Good.
Can help you.
Thanks again. Appreciate it. All right, coming up, race in America continues to be an area in which some continue to hammer Donald Trump. But you'd be surprised what some African Americans are saying about President Trump and his detractors. James Farr with the Pasadena Black Pages gives us his take on that next. Remember when Congressman John Lewis called Donald Trump's presidency illegitimate? Trump thundered back, calling the congressman's district crime-infested. Some African Americans came to Trump's defense.
It was Democrats, bull counters, that oppressed folks. It was Democrats that voted for the litmus test called the literacy test and the poll tax. He was fighting Democrats. But after they beat his behind on that bridge and ran over him and stomped him on the ground, he got up and turned and joined them. He joined the oppressors and became a stooge for them, where he was now sitting and presiding over the destruction of the black community.
That was former Black Panther Mason Weaver blasting the civil rights activists. Pasadena Black Pages publisher James Farr joins us now with his thoughts on this. James, now Weaver said that the Democrats beat and ran over Congressman Lewis back in the 60s, and then Congressman Lewis joined the oppressor. What do you think when you hear that?
I mean, I think the context in what he is saying, yes, primarily the Dixie South, if you will, was primarily Democratic Party. But, where we are contemporarily, we see more of an interest in the Democratic Party within the African American community as opposed to the Republican Party.
Pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, it's just that the two aren't relatable.
Was it okay that he said that? Did it make sense, or were you? Did you get angry when you heard that?
I think the bigger issue was that he really took a very broad brush and painted the citizens of Atlanta as crime, criminals, drugs, and we just know that that's not the case. We know that homicides in Atlanta are up from year to date over the last year, but overall, the FBI did a study over the last 30 years, and it shows that of the top 100 cities in this country, Atlanta isn't seeing an increase in homicide. So I think he was just being irresponsible and just really spewing out a bunch of rhetoric.
Detroit and Chicago and all of that, they have representatives from those areas and those districts in Congress, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of change. And some of these Congress people have been there for many, many years. That's ultimately what Donald Trump was saying. Trump faced a lot of heat for that, but is there any truth to what he said?
Well, there's no truth, but what the truth of the matter is crime was there well before John Lewis was in office. Crime was there in the early 1900s. Crime was there at the peak of the Harlem Renaissance. There's always going to be a criminal element. So to blatantly kind of paint this picture of all African Americans or African Americans in these urban cities as living in crime-infested neighborhoods is just totally irresponsible and shameful.
But we do know, James, that Detroit is pretty messed up, right?
Okay.
And Chicago with the murders and the homicides and all of that. I mean, I think there was more homicides last year than ever.
700 or so, yeah.
Yeah, a huge
and
amount.
that's a problem. I'm not saying that that's not a problem. I'm not saying that that is not an issue. But when you say Chicago as a whole, do we instantly think of Chirac? No, we think of, I know a lot of people from Chicago and a lot of people in Atlanta. And
I used to live in Chicago.
And
so,
they're wonderful people. I mean, we cannot allow a small percentage of the population to paint the whole narrative for us as a whole. So I totally disagree with what he's trying to paint.
You're saying that there's other areas of Chicago and other areas of these cities that are just fine, right?
I'm saying,
and you're saying that nobody's like really focusing on those. They only focus on the criminals.
Even within the city that I live in, in the same zip code, you can have a huge disparity in social economical situations. So let's not pretend like crime, poverty has not always existed, but we know a lot of successful people. We know everyday people who live in these cities who aren't a part of the violence and the crime, and they just are productive citizens and taxpayers.
So you're totally on the side of John Lewis, totally against Donald Trump when they had that battle going.
I mean, I think Donald Trump has, what next, so.
He does keep everybody on their toes. I think everyone would probably agree with that.
I think he steps on toes to distract. So, I mean, I see his plays as a sleight of hand. Here we are today talking about what he said about a noble man, John Lewis, yet he is signing executive orders left and right. So it's really a distraction. The guy is a ringleader, and we are now at this point in his circus.
So you are out in the community quite a bit with Pasadena Black Pages. You hold events and things like that for the African American communities. Do you hear any pro-Trump sentiment at all? Or is
I have.
You have?
I have.
In the Black communities?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not anomalies? Like, there's also lots of YouTube videos. I mean, you go to YouTube and type in like Black Trump supporter and tons of videos come up, you know? Are there anomalies? Are there
I mean,
anomalies?
you know, they're not anomalies, but I am not a Trump supporter, and none of the people who I find that are in my circle would support the politics of Donald Trump. But there are those who do, and to me, I kind of look at them like, okay.
You're just on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, some people criticize President Obama, black and white, criticize President Obama because of the unemployment rate in the Black community. It's like 23%. And this is from the Bureau of Statistics, right? And teen unemployment, super high under President Obama's watch. Some people really criticize him for that. Do you think it'll be different under Trump?
Hell, absolutely not. Absolutely. I don't think, and at least the people that I'm talking to in the community, we have not expected Obama to do anything, nor do we expect Donald Trump to do anything.
There was no expectation for President Obama to do something?
There was no collective ask. Do what? What did we ask him to do?
I don't know. That's a great question. But I think there were people asking for job fairs and, you know, this and that, you know.
They wanted job hiring. They didn't want job fairs. They didn't want companies to come market and brand in front of hundreds of people. No, they wanted to be hired. But there is no industrial age. I think what we're doing to our kids in this contemporary time is there are no industrial jobs. There are no factories. So when we keep telling our children to go to school, go to college, and I'm not anti-college at all, but I'm saying the actual manual hands-on skill sets that are needed to be employable. These kids are coming out of school highly in debt. That's not Obama's fault. These kids are coming out to an economy where there aren't very many jobs, entry-level jobs, to even be afford to live in the city from which they were born and raised. That wasn't Obama's fault. This is a system that's been in place.
We're going to have to continue this conversation because I think there's a lot more to be said there. But I really appreciate your point of view. Thank you for coming on, James, and talking to me about this.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Coming up, the new president has been very busy moving forward on the Keystone and Dakota pipelines and starting the preliminary steps for the southern border wall. We'll have the weekly wrap-up next. He signed a bunch of executive orders already in his first week as president, including getting started on the southern border wall and moving forward with the Keystone and Dakota pipelines. Here's the news you might have missed in our weekly wrap-up. First, President Trump sent shockwaves throughout the country as he signed an order freezing federal hiring with a couple of exemptions, including military personnel. Some government workers called it a knee-jerk reaction, while limited government conservatives applauded the order. There are approximately 2 million federal employees. Another executive order directs federal agencies to begin easing the regulatory burdens of Obamacare. He's telling his agencies to waive or delay implementing costly fees on individuals, families, healthcare providers, and other groups. President Trump has also signed executive orders reviving the Keystone and Dakota pipelines. Protesters barred the way for construction on the Dakota pipeline in 2016, and President Obama had dropped the Keystone matter. Trump's order invites TransCanada to resubmit their application to build Keystone and asks the Commerce Department to ease the permitting process. The president has also ordered the authorization of a southern border wall, which includes the hiring of 5,000 new Border Patrol agents and strips federal grants from sanctuary cities. Plenty of other executive orders went into effect this week. Those were just a few we wanted to highlight. That's it for this show. Thanks to LA Progressive's Sharon, gerontologist with About Senior Solutions, Mary Winters, and James Farr with the Pasadena Black Pages. Join us again next time for more in-depth discussion of the issues impacting politics and the people. In the meantime, please visit our social media platforms for more content. I'm guest host Tammy Devine. For all of us here, thanks for watching. See you next time.